Welcome to another episode of the I Know a Guy podcast. In this episode, I welcome Mitch Glaeser. Mitch is a real estate developer. He's the owner and CEO of Emory Group Companies. Mitch has traveled the world doing speaking engagements and motivational speaking. He's also been on the ground as an entrepreneur, growing businesses, investing, and now he's embraced a role of still maintaining those businesses, but being a mentor. He offers a lot of advice in this episode, this podcast, about what you should and what you shouldn't do. He looks back at his experiences and delivers some really, really powerful stories and information I think you'll find helpful. So I hope you enjoy this episode of the I Know a Guy podcast. So Mitch Glaeser, thank you for joining us. Mitch is you've got a company, Emory Group
Companies,
yep. And you're the CEO,
right?
And doing a lot of real estate investment, development, working in communities. Help tell the story for me of how all that starts. What's it look like? So in lay terms, right? Somebody sees somebody that's done very well, they just assume that someone gave them some money and that's it. But there's more of a story there,
right? Well, that has a lot of moving pieces to it because it did start a long time before I was even born. So a lot of the things that we do, and I talk about it more as a family than me as an individual. It is true that I provide a lot of leadership for my family, and I'm kind of the front person for a lot of the things we do. I get a lot of the public praise and on stage and so forth. But there's a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes that are equally as important. And I kind of hark back, I guess, when you talk about the beginning of really the kinds of things that I've been able to personally accomplish and in cooperation with my family and really those around me. I mean, it's really a community effort in terms of the things that I've been able to, quote, accomplish. So, but it goes back to my grandfather, Mitchell Emory, who I was actually named after. He was a very, very impactful individual, not only on my family, but also on the communities that he was also in down in Zephyr Hills, Florida. He was a poultry farmer. He also taught teachers. He was, taught teachers to teach. He was a CPA by education. He was a post commander for the American Legion. He was an elected school board member down south as well. So he had ingrained in all the kinds of things that we believe in and have been able to carry forward, those cornerstones. And what's really fascinating about that is he died when my mother was 8 years old. And still to this day, and my mother's still with us, all of those kinds of traits and really principled givebacks and the ability to listen to a community's needs and be able to step up and provide leadership to that really harks back to Mitchell Emory. And so from there, there's a lot of other very creative and moving pieces that include my father's side of the family that had a strong impact as well. His mother, who were, basically factory workers, in New Jersey, German immigrants, so there's a very good story there. They also died when my father was fairly young, but very, very impactful in terms of, living the American dream as we've kind of, as people describe it, starting with virtually nothing and working very, very hard and ethically and honestly and, tenaciously, very dedicated and passionate about the things we do, either in the business side or even in the community, in which a lot of people know us for. So there's a lot of stories there as well. And then, really as a child growing up in a foster family. So that's an interesting piece. I talk a lot about that because it had such a profound effect on really, so I was the youngest of four born to my mother. And so to set the stage right for that. And then they took in over about a 30-year period, 76 foster children, and we adopted one, Teresa, my sister Teresa. And so but we were all treated equals.
Mm-hmm.
So it was all by age. Front seat of the car was the oldest person, and it just kind of went down from there. It didn't matter if you were a foster child or not. So I somewhat identify, as being raised in a foster family.
Mm-hmm.
And I take a lot of pride in that because I think there's a lot of hard work and things that you figure out in life a lot earlier because you're thrown into these situations that you recognize are going to happen or not happen for you. And so there's stories around that as well.
So when it comes to giving, your grandparents, what year would you say this is? Are we in the 30s, 40s, 50s?
Believe it or not, it was 1923. It was 100 years ago that my grandfather and Teresa, his wife, my grandmother Teresa, moved to Zephyr Hills, Florida. And that's really the birth of Emory Group Companies. So our company is 100 years old this
Wow.
year. Yeah.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And so times that they ran through some tough times then when you started getting into the Great Depression.
Of course. Very, very much.
They ever talk
so.
about that?
Well, one of the unbelievable things is the fact that when my grandfather died, that would left my grandmother, with 6 girls to raise on a poultry farm in Zephyr Hills, Florida.
Uh-huh.
And we talk about leadership, and we talk about breaking the glass ceiling for women, and we talk about role models in our lives. And I think, my mother doesn't talk a lot about, she talks a lot about her mother, but she doesn't talk about in the context I'm about to say. When a woman is thrust into that situation, when her husband dies and she's got 6 girls at home, and I'm talking just stair-step girls, that is a moment of power, and that's a moment of real truth about what you're going to do and step up to do. The neat part about that is we all have that capability in us no matter what the situation is. And that's what I try to inspire people to understand. It really doesn't, truthfully, it doesn't matter if you come from humble beginnings or if you're Bill Gates and have all the worth in the world. Mm-hmm. Your impact on society can have the same kinds of rippling effects. It just can. Mm-hmm. And when you look back at my grandmother, they certainly had no money and really just worked their tail off to make it work.
Can we? Now let me interrupt you. Can we define that when we say no money? What did daily life look like? Right? We're saying no money, meaning they're just trying to get a loaf of bread and some rice for food on the table.
Yeah. So growing up on a farm allows you the opportunity, believe it or not, for survivability, because you would grow crops and you'd grow animals and you do this, and so that part was probably more capable than meets the eye. I mean, you can kind of do that today if you want to take that on. There's a funny story about kind of the relevance of value back then. So my mother was a very young girl. I think she was about 5 or 6 years old. She might have been younger, but I think she was about 6 years old. And, she knew that they were selling eggs, right? Mm-hmm. And so my grandfather had all these chickens, and they'd have the eggs and they'd sell them. And so my mother got inquisitive and was like, Papa, how much do we make on each egg? Right. So she's putting it all together like, hey, he's getting money for these eggs. How much are you getting? And he told her, he said, it's really about the equivalence of a grain of sand. Mm. And so she was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Right. He said, well, let me show you something. So he takes her by the hand and he sees it as this amazing teachable moment. And he takes her over to the corner of the house and he's talking to her and he says, do you enjoy living in this home? And she said, well, yeah, but I have to share the bedroom with all my sisters, of course, right? And he said, well, it puts a roof over our head and it protects us, and, we're able to celebrate and eat in the living room, in the dining room, and you're able to have a comfortable night's sleep, and we're able to live in this home. And he goes to the corner of the home and he scoops up a hand of sand. And he said, you see those grains of sand? That's the foundation in which this house sits, right? And then he goes on to tell her, he says, think about the beaches and how each of those grains of sand work with each other and hold back the biggest storms that Mother Nature can throw at us, and holds back the largest oceans. He said it's those grains of sand that work together, those small little pieces that add up to be something super relevant. And she took that in life. It was a financial equation to say, hey, these little, say you make a penny on each egg, those pennies add up to dollars. But he wanted this teachable moment for her to understand that, hey, small things in life collectively, you can achieve a whole lot more than is relevant to the eye. And there the house was sitting on the foundation of millions, if not billions, of grains of sand. And it was just this very amazing moment. So when you talk about, financial versus, impact, right? When you talk about somebody of, low net worth versus high net worth, what are their impacts on life? Believe it or not, they have the ability to do both. Now, Bill Gates can give his money to things that a poor person can't, that I can't.
Right.
But there's still ways of having a ripple effect.
Yeah.
And grains of sand reminds me of that.
So growing up, influences by your dad on your career, your life.
100%. My father was an amazing man. And I will share with you that amazing in the sense that he was not perfect. He was a very imperfect man. He was an alcoholic, had not drank for the last maybe, I don't know the exact number of years, maybe 40 years of his life, but he was an alcoholic. And he was a functional, what they call functioning alcoholic. He would get up, go to work every day, and then he'd come in at night and just drink and drink and drink. He was a fun guy, but he definitely, in today's world, he would not survive the DUI checkpoints that they have and so forth. Never put us in jeopardy or anything. Never anything negative in that regard. So he was an imperfect man, but what that taught me was to stay away from alcohol. Now, I do drink occasionally, but it really is something that I understand very well about addiction. And so that's one characteristic that allowed me to really learn from him. And in later life, when he quit drinking, he showed us the power of being in control of yourself, and your self-worth.
Sure.
And so there was a lot of that as well. But he was, my father, who passed away about 2.5 years ago, he was loved by everybody. He honestly, I do not know of a single person that he did not get along with. It really was, and both my parents are that way, quite honestly. They live their lives that way. They do not embrace the white noise of things that go on around them. They are pioneers in what they've done. They adopted the first minority child in Florida's history as a Caucasian family. Back in, Teresa was born in 1969, came straight from the hospital to our family and immediately fell in love with her and wanted to adopt her. And that was a very complicated case back in the day, and they lost virtually all of their, quote, friends over it because they didn't understand that it really was not the relevance of the skin color to the Martin Luther King teachings that we really want to hold, that it's really the character of the person and not the color of the skin. Right. And my parents really believed in those kinds of principles. And again, that's leading from really who their parents and, my grandparents. And so some really incredible moments of time. My father empowered that. Candidly, it was kind of my mother wanted more children. Yeah. And my father was like, hey, if Joni's happy, I'm happy. And
Right.
So he jumped on board with that. But an amazing father. And of course, my mother is known as Saint Joan. To anybody who knows her, they know her passion for children.
Your family's important to you. Your siblings growing up, and
very much so.
And you're the youngest of?
I'm the youngest of 4. When I was born, my mother couldn't have any more children.
Right.
When my mother had Greg, the third child, she had complications, waited 5 years to have me. And then when that happened, it was unfortunately, for medical reasons, she was not able to have any more children. So they immediately actually turned to foster care because they wanted this big family. It's funny because my parents got married. My dad was stationed at MacDill Air Force Base during Korea, and my mother was in Zephyr Hills. So the Air Force Base was down in Tampa. And so they met. They dated for a number of years. And when my mother was 17, my father went to my grandmother, Teresa, and he went to her to ask to marry his daughter, her daughter, excuse me.
Yeah.
And my dad gave her a ring. My grandmother gave her the ring and said, when you think that we're ready to get married, I would like for you to give me this ring back, and I will ask your daughter to marry me.
Wow.
And she took the ring and didn't give him permission. and so he was like, holy crap, So a few months go by, and Christmas Eve dinner, and I might have it confused with Thanksgiving, but it was Christmas Eve dinner. And anyways, she slips there. Listen, my mother's the youngest, so all of her siblings were at this point. They were married and had kids and all, and the house was crazy and packed. And so, anyways, Dad was actually next to my grandmother, and at this Christmas dinner, Christmas Eve dinner. And he slips her the ring under the table. And he's like, holy crap. So his appetite went to nothing. I mean, just instantaneously. And so he asked, with all these people around and everything, and he just wanted to get it done. And so he asked my mother to go outside. Well, it was cold. It was a cold, chilly evening. So they go in the car. And I don't know how you get on bent knee in the car, but he asked my mother to marry him. And anyways, he comes back inside, and my grandmother said, well, what did she say? And he goes, I don't know. She fainted, which is a true story. Oh yeah, it's a true story. But she had come around. She of course said yes. And they were married a couple months later. They moved to Gainesville in a 28-foot long mobile home. Okay. 28 feet.
Wow.
Was, there was a mobile home park kind of where Carrabba's is on 34th Street, but 34th has been widened so much. They were, I believe, the first lot on the right as you went in. Their mobile home would literally sit in the middle of 34th Street today, physically in the middle there on Archer Road. And my dad went to college at the University of Florida. And so they got married, moved up here, 28 foot. In 36 months, they were a family of 5. 3 kids in 36 months, and then my parents. And so then my dad had to drop out. And, he was a police officer at the University of Florida while he was going to college. And he was a very, very inspiring individual, and really lived by the principles of treating everyone so fair, and really the ethics that we live by within our organizations are driven by my father, truthfully.
Your father, was a police officer long, or did he stay on the force long?
He was a police officer for, he was in the military, so that training kind of carried forward. He dropped out after a couple of years, possibly, the 3 years or whatever. Once the 3rd child came, I think it was over. But he did go back to college and got his degree, by the way, in computer sciences, and then taught out at Santa Fe. It was kind of a second career.
Okay.
He, he pretty much retired when he was 55. He saw the struggles of his parents and recognized he wasn't really sure how long his DNA was going to take him in life, because his mother and father also died when they were young. They were heavy smokers and drank a lot in the evening. They were wonderful individuals. My grandfather actually worked for Curtis Wright of the Wright brothers.
Wow.
Believe it or not.
That's a story in itself.
Yeah,
isn't it?
it is. It's kind of crazy to think about that kind of, heritage is in my family. And so he never really knew, but he said no matter what strata I'm in, I'm going to retire at 55. And so that's what he did. And did some fun things. He was really kind of just that, and then had a stroke at 61 years old. And after that stroke, he was empowered to live a second life. And he went back to college, and he got his degree, and he taught, and then he retired again in his 70s.
Wow.
Yeah, late 70s.
That's inspiring.
Yeah, he's really and he was a character. He was funny, and and when he was in real estate for he's developed over 6,000 acres in Alachua County's history, right? So all residential, where I focused on the commercial side. And he would get up. My mother would get all the chicks out the door, meaning all the kids, and my father would kind of sleep in, and he would get up after we left and we're off to school. But he would get up and he'd make his rounds. So he'd go by and he'd get coffee from the attorneys, and he'd get coffee from the surveying office, and he'd get coffee at the property appraiser's office, and he knew everybody. And he just made his rounds to lunch, and he'd find somebody to have lunch, and then work really began. That was kind of his routine, if you will. And so yeah, he was funny, but he was a jokester and a prankster. And I mean, even days before he died, he pranked the hell out of me.
Really?
Oh my God. Oh, Christmas.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, it's the watch I'm wearing right now he gave me. And what had happened was September 17th of 2017, I decided to retire.
Okay.
And so I was on a dozen boards or whatever, probably 10. And so over the previous couple of years, I was getting off those boards, and which I had, started my early career. I mean, I was in real estate school when I was 17 years old. So that was 43 years ago. So a long time. I've been in real estate a lot longer than people realize.
You look pretty young.
I appreciate that. But yeah, they think, my God, you came out of the womb, got your real estate license. And so I was getting off the boards. I retired September 17th of 2017. So I do not have a computer at home. I do not have the internet at home.
Right.
I pinged you this morning. I'm like, what time are we going on? Because I don't have an alarm clock at home. And so my life was simplified, and I literally follow my passion. Everything I do in life today is purely passion driven.
So you don't have a computer at home right now?
No, not at all.
Why is this?
Because I want my home to be what homes are intended for family, for fun, for retreat, for rest, for celebration.
Yeah.
Not for work, not to respond to white noise and respond to, the demands of everyday life. It is very, very empowering. I will tell you, a lot of people think they can't do it, but you can. I still have a phone, so I can kind of still pick up my phone and look at emails or whatever, but I don't respond via my phone. I will text, some to keep, if that's needed or whatever. But I have empowered the teams of people that I have employed, and so they know what to do.
Yeah.
I feel like I have veto power. That's all I have. They have a decision. I say, no, we're not doing that direction. Then they pivot. But other than that, they're running the show. And so, but back to my father.
Yeah, sure.
So 2017, I took off my watch and I took out the battery and I set it to 5 o'clock. And that was a reminder to myself, the old Jimmy Buffett 5 o'clock somewhere, right? And, we get off work at 5. So, hey, I'm done, right? I'm going to live my life in a very different way that's designed by me, not for me. And that's the big difference that people don't recognize is your life, your relationships. My business partner, I marvel at his relationship because they've designed their relationship. They're not in a relationship with his wife, Carissa. They actually designed it. And that's what we should do with our lives. That's what we should do with our relationships. That's what we should do with our families. That's what we should do with our organizations, our companies, our communities. We have the ability to design a community that we want to live in and thrive in. And people too often are playing catch up, right? So they're looking and they're reactive instead of proactive. Easy to say, I get it, but you have to have that mindset. I think very, very differently than most people, quite honestly. People recognize that. My own family does. They look at me and go, your concepts that's crazy, right? But it is looking at things in a very, very different way. And that's how we've been able to excel within the organizations that I've built. It could be on the civic organizations that I'm involved in. We look at things differently. We make it happen, or we don't. We at least try. There's a lot more value in trying and failing than not trying and not knowing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I set my watch aside. I finished this story.
Yeah.
I set it to 5:00, and it was a complete, uh, reminder, a constant reminder. And people would look at it and go, "What time is it?" And or they'd look at my watch and say, "Your watch is wrong." Nope, it's no, you're actually wrong. You're wrong. It's 5:00 in my world. And so I love to live that lifestyle. And I literally tell a lot of people this story because it's one to go after. So that watch was kind of getting worn out, looking a little bit. I love the watch, but it was getting worn out. And my folks said, "Hey, Christmas is coming around." This is in 2020, of Christmas of 2020. I'd not seen my parents for about 9 months because of COVID, and I'd seen them through the windows and stuff like that, but I refused to have contact with them. My father was ill of sorts, and they were elder. They're both. My mother's 80, almost 87.
Wow.
My dad passed away. His birthday was just the 7th. He would have been 91 years old.
Wow.
And so this is great. So I sent my mother 2 links. I don't have a lot of things in life, but I don't have a lot of wants in life. I just, my wants are so achievable that I get them for myself, right?
Gotcha.
So I thought, you know what? They want to know what they can get me for Christmas. So I want a new watch. So lo and behold, I sent them 2 links. One was a little more expensive. One was a little more affordable. I let them decide on which one. And so they said, "Hey, Christmas Day, we're going to set a chair outside the house at the front door, and we're going to put your gift on it. You come over, knock on the door. We're going to open the door up. We're going to be in the living room, and we'll watch you open your gift." Now, this is crazy, right?
Now, this is how long ago? Just a few years ago?
Yeah, it's the middle of COVID. This is in
Gotcha.
2020,
Perfect. Yep.
right?
Uh-huh.
And so I wasn't stepping a foot inside that home. We
Right.
had my brother Mark was the identified sibling that had the conduit to go back and forth, and that was
Okay.
we're going to limit the exposure that they would have. So
Sure.
the groceries delivered, the medicine, all their needs, whatever, could go in the house via Mark, and that was it. And so it was just a pragmatic approach. Nobody really knew. I know this. If my father would have gotten COVID, it would not have been a good day. So anyways, I opened the gift. It's this gorgeous wooden box, of this Switzerland company. And I'm so excited. Their logo's on the outside of it. And I'm like, oh, which one did they get me? And so I open it up, and it's neither watch. It's like this little leather black band and this little flat silver watch. And I'm like reduced to like a 12-year-old at this point. And I'm like, "Mom, this is not it." And she's like, "Mitchell, you sent me 2 links. I looked at them. I bought you one of them. It's what you sent me." And I'm like, and so I immediately was like masking my disappointment because I really wasn't getting.
Sure.
We really don't do a lot of gifts switching in our family and stuff. Like I'll get stuff for my family and stuff, or nieces and nephews sometimes. But anyway, so I'm like trying to mask this disappointment. I swear I was just like, I was even mad at myself for kind of going with that reaction because it's just stuff, right? But it was going to be sentimental because it was from my parents and so forth. And so lo and behold, I, get this big disappointment. And my mother's having this, very direct Mitchell, she calls me Mitchell. That's, doesn't get any more serious. Nobody calls me Mitchell. And so anyways, I said, "That's fine. Look, they're a professional company. I'll just exchange it and I'll get the right watch." And I look over to my father, and he is rolling, laughing out of it, his lazy boy chair. And I'm like, "You have got to be kidding me." They never get me. Like I get everybody
Yeah.
else, right? Because I'm a big practical jokester as
Sure.
well. And so anyways, he got me, and then about 2 weeks later, he passed away.
Mm.
So I wear the watch. I do not cry over my father. I actually
Yeah.
celebrate his life. He was 88 years old. He was a very, very loving, caring, generous man.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to inspire people, to find the greatness in their parents. My only disappointment was when I see my mother break down. That makes me
Yeah,
break down.
sure.
But other than that, I just absolutely celebrate everything I know about my father.
So we'll move on, but I want to stay with your father for a second. There's a story about a silver dollar.
Yes. So
How do you break? How do you break? Right.
the cycle? Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So to kind of just bring that story to a start and an end, and so that people watching would understand, when my grandmother came to the United States, her parents had nothing, and they just wanted to live the American dream. And so they got her a silver dollar with her birth year on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And and she was born in the late 1700s. Okay. So I believe it was 1794. And so she had this silver dollar, and it was what she had. It's the only possession that she had from her upbringing, the only thing she had. And they were Catholic. And my father was going through First Communion, and my grandfather, my father's parents, my grandfather and grandmother had nothing either. Like I said, they were pretty much shop workers in Paterson, New Jersey. Punching the clock and simple life. And so when that came around, they had nothing, and they were like, "What can we get Ralph as a memento kind of thing of time?" And my grandmother gave my father the silver dollar.
Mm.
And my father carried that silver dollar every day since then in his front pocket. Even when, all through high school, in the military, he carried that silver dollar everywhere he went. It was that impactful to him. And so you have to fast forward. He's in the military. He's down in Tampa area at MacDill Air Force Base, and he gets the call, and his mother's dying.
Mm.
Of course, he had no car. I mean, it's hard. So everybody has a poor story, and I hate talking about our poor story,
Sure.
right? Because Bill Gates' son got a Ferrari and not a Bugatti, so that's his poor story. I'm making that up, of course,
I got you.
world. But, everybody feels like they had the humble beginnings, right? I mean, to a large part,
Sure.
everybody feels like, oh, we had it rough, But, so fast forward, my father didn't have a car. I mean, that was unthinkable if you didn't have money. So he hitchhiked. He hitchhiked from Tampa, Florida, all the way to Paterson, New Jersey. It took him days to get there. And he went up, and he took that silver dollar out on my grandmother's hospital bed and literally clenched it between their hands and said a prayer.
Mm-mm-mm.
Only to have to turn around and hitchhike all the way back home. And when he was hitchhiking back home, he got word that she had passed away. So the silver dollar really had a tremendous amount of meaning to my father. And then he got married to my mother. Then came 4 boys and no money. And he was struggling. He was flipping burgers at a place called King Burger, not Burger King, but it's located on 16th Avenue. He's flipping burgers at night, and he was trying to sell real estate during the day. He had just gotten into real estate. And every Thursday or so, he took the silver dollar down to the corner gas station, basically. And he told the guy, he said, "Look," he said, "this is my last dollar." He said, "I want you to do me a favor. Will you set it aside, and when I get paid tomorrow, I'll come back and redeem it." And so he'd get a loaf of bread and some peanut butter, and that's what he fed the family. I mean, this is just this is bare bones last dollar in the pocket. And you can imagine he carried it all that time, and here he's, using it as leverage. So he would do this week after week after week after week, and it was just this struggle. He's like, I'm never going to get off this, wheel. I'll never get out of this rut. I'll never get out of this habit. What am I going to do? And it's feeding my family. Now, this is the poetic moment, because sometimes tough decisions in life on paper or in like pragmatically even, I live a very pragmatic life, don't necessarily add up and make sense, because what he does next is like, what the hell are you doing? What are you thinking? And so he was going to work there at King Burger that evening, and he said, you know what, I'm going to go by St. Patrick's, which was only a few blocks away. And he went into the church and he dropped that silver dollar into the poor box, never to be retrieved again. And he walked out of there and he went to work, and believe it or not, as poetically as it would be, the owner asked him, said, hey, Ralph, any good deals out there? I've got some money to invest. And he sold her Magnesia Springs.
Wow.
And from then forward, he was always able to feed his family. Kind of crazy.
I parallel what he did there is very intentional. I'm going to break the cycle.
Yep.
With what you then discussed a little bit ago about being intentional about your relationships, about how you live your life.
Right.
And for me, knowing, and you mentioned this earlier about sort of the kids, you're the more seen one, the one who speaks more. And you've been that way in the North Central Florida and around the world doing speaking engagements. Yep. And to hear a story, it may be your poor story, but for people to hear it who are looking for some hope, who can look and go, wow, he did it. They did it. Their family did it. And here's where they came from. It's very, very inspiring. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that, because I know a lot of that's very personal too.
Well, it is. And it does, it's at the core of kind of what I draw from, by being intentional, as you say, but also, as I like to think, to design the life you want to live. And so I've got this book that's half written called The Sexy Rut, and people are like, what the heck does that mean? So I used to do speaking around the globe, as you mentioned, do motivational speaking. And I would ask people, and it was all a set up question because they were sent there to be motivated. But I would say, how many people in here are in a rut, and hell, all the hands would go up. They're talking rut. Are you kidding me? And so I would design a perfect day for them. I would talk at length about, the getting up with the family and how you treat family and spouse and, relationship with yourself and your spirit, and, how to kick that day off, and what does it mean to have a good day at work, and what does it mean to be impactful to a community, and whatever drives you, really. I mean, there is no perfect rut for everyone to have the same path, right? Because it's all about your own driven passion. But I would set all of this up and I would say, now, how many of you would like to live a day like that? And every hand would go up. And I said, that's called the sexy rut. And it was a way to just kind of like embed in them that you can design a rut. Sometimes a rut isn't a bad thing if it's a good one. If you hit on all those notes I was just talking about, and that's the life you live, you want the deepest rut you can possibly build, right? You do not ever want to get out. You want to have a healthy relationship with your significant other the rest of your eternal life, right? Eternal life. And so that is the path that you want to create. And a lot of people think of a rut as being a negative. And so I flipped it. And so I get people to think about, creating this design path. And you can go down this path. It doesn't have to be a straight path. It can be one that's fluid and moves and grows and does different things. And much like the silver dollar, it's about you could have your day tomorrow be different than it is today. You can design, you can take that silver dollar, something that you're doing every day now that you might go, well, this is helping 10 people. Well, I'm going to get rid of that and I'm going to help 100 people. That's you're like, how do I give that up? But then you have to say, what is the overall net gain? And the net gain of giving up that silver dollar was to force the hand to do something different. There was going to have to be a different solution than buying a jar of peanut butter and a loaf of bread to feed your family.
Mm-hmm.
Find a different path. And that's what he ended up doing.
Wow.
And it worked out
Sure.
for him. And, it is by the, grace of God that those things kind of happen. But if you live your life in the right way, it's funny how things will turn out well for you.
Yeah.
So
all your business ventures that you've done, folks that you've worked with and met, have you ever failed?
oh yeah. So you learn a lot more. I mean, there's cliches, out there
of
about,
course.
you learn a lot more from a failure than you do a significant gain. I've had both experiences. I've lost millions of dollars in a publishing deal that I had, and I've also made mega millions in a publishing deal I had.
Sure.
And so I learned a lot, and I learned how to, candidly, it's funny. So there's, our whole family would go door to door knocking for odd jobs. We had no money. We got a nickel per year old we were. So if you were 5 years old, you got a quarter a week. If you were 6, you got 30 cents. If you were 18 years old, you got 90 cents a week. I mean, that's the way the structure worked. All the kids, didn't matter foster, well, that's the amount of money you got per week. That was it. And so we had to go hustle. So I bought my own car, bought my own gas, bought my own insurance, my own tires, my own everything. I bought my own, if I went to the movie, it was all on us. And my brothers cropped the back and did all kinds of odd jobs. I, packed bell peppers, and I sold shoes, and I sold seeds, and I sold everything. I mean, if you could sell it, I used to get records for selling the most of, even in middle school, we would sell car wash tickets. And of course I sold the most, not of course, but I sold the most. That was kind of arrogant, but, no,
but of course you did.
We knew, no, but we knew how to survive. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was survival. And, yeah, I mean, we did that. I mean, there's a funny story. I don't think I've ever told this one. I've told a lot of them. I've told the red wagon story about pulling up elephant ears and then putting them in a red wagon when I was 6 years old. And I would go door to door to sell them then. The lady was like, I need them taken out because they're growing and going anywhere, and throw them away. And I was like, throw them away? Are you kidding? I'm going to sell these. And so I went door to door and I would sell them. It was crazy.
Where's that vision come from?
Well, the environment we were in, again, back to having to do things if you wanted, we would take the Sears catalog. This was great. So take the Sears catalog and you'd rip a page out. If you really wanted to sell, especially as a kid, you'd go, hey, see this new bicycle? This is the bike I'm trying to buy, and it's $29.95. Until I get $29.95, I'm going to keep going door to door. And that's the way we went. That's the way we hustled, But yeah, and I did sell a lot of things. I needed to write them down or put them to memory or whatever. There was just tons of stuff. Back in the day, you could sell stuff. So if you had a product, we sold Cokes. I sold Cokes we called them mixers, not Cokes at the Gator games, right? And so we would sell those. Mostly we'd sell for the first half because we wanted some money. And then the second half, which is most relevant, we got to watch. So it's the only way I could ever go to a Gator game was to find a way in to sell something. That was it. I mean, we didn't have money. We had no money.
Right.
People, you have to understand, we had no money at all. And we lived a great life. But I mean, we lived on a creek. We would go sharks. We would do all kinds of stuff. I mean, we were the house. Our family was very structured. You'd sit down at dinner every night at the same time, and you'd look over and, hey, you're a new face. Are you a foster brother and sister or whatever? Are you visiting? It's like, no, I'm going home, but I know y'all got good food, so we're gonna eat here. But we were kind of we were the center of the neighborhood kind of attention. But no, yeah, I mean, there's tons. I was going to tell you the story that I rarely ever tell, but it's really funny. So when you turn 12 years old in our family, you can start mowing lawns. So before it was knock, knock, knock. Can I sweep your porch? Can I take out your garbage? Can I whatever they wanted done, right? But the big money was in lawns.
Yeah,
you get $5. I mean, and that was a huge amount of money. So turned 12 years old. You can mow lawns, but you cannot use our lawnmower. So couldn't use the parents' lawnmower because I would take my lawnmower and go door to door if they'd let me. Of course, I didn't have money to buy a lawnmower either. So, so I go door to door. This is a funny, unbelievable story, and I'll tell you even the punchline to it. It's going to blow your mind. So we go door to door. I go door to door, and I come across this lawn that was half my height. Okay, I mean it was crazy. So I knock on it. Your lawn needs mowing. Can I mow it? And she's like, "Yeah, Sonny, my husband died, and he's not here, and I don't know what to do. I'd love for you to mow my lawn." I said, "Well, do you have to have a lawnmower?" She goes, "Yeah, it's here, but it hasn't been used in a year." So it's one of these, you crank it up, and you fold the handle into the middle, and then you push this button. It goes, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, right? So it's spring-loaded. You're cranking the spring. You put the handle in the middle, and you do it. I did that for hours. And I was like, okay, pour gas in the carburetor, do this, do that, put your hand, all the little tricks that all the, kids know how to start these lawnmowers. Could never get it to run. And I was like, man, I want this money. I really have I have to have this money. So I couldn't use our lawnmower, but I could use somebody else's lawnmower.
Yeah.
So I went door to door and I said, hey, my name's Mitch. I live down the street. I have a lady's lawn that I can mow and make $5. Can I borrow your lawnmower or rent it from you? And they were like, no, you might chop off your hand kind of thing.
Yeah.
They were like, no. So I went to this one house on 39th Avenue. I remember right where I could take you there right now. It's on 39th Avenue, and there were 2 lawnmowers in there. And so I went to the door, and a lady answered the door. She came to the door, and I said, hey, I'm Mitch, and I've got this proposition. And so anyway, she goes, well, hold on, let me get my husband. So he comes to the door, and I said, sir, you have 2 lawnmowers in that garage. I can see them from here. And you can only use one of them. Can't I just use one of them for the day? And he looked at me and he said, if you promise to return it and you promise to be safe, you can use it. So I took the lawnmower, and it was about 2 or 3 blocks away, and I rolled it all the way down there. So I start mowing the lawn, and it's like, 2 inches at a time. Well, the sun starts going down, and my parents look at each other and go, well, he killed himself, And so Dad said, I'll go find him. So he starts going up and down the streets in the neighborhood, and he looks over, and he's like, holy crap, there's my son mowing the lawn, like this, right?
Yeah.
So he pulls over, and he goes, Mitchell, he says, get in the car. He said, put the bike in the car, put the lawnmower up, and, you can come back and finish it tomorrow. And I said, yeah, but I got to return this lawnmower. And he goes, what are you talking about? I said, no, I got to return the lawnmower. I borrowed it from the guys down the street. And he said, are you crazy? Are you kidding me? And so I did that. Now, I finished the lawn. I made the bucks. That's a true story. And, my parents asked me never to borrow a lawnmower again. And I had heeded their advice and so forth, but that really did happen. Fast forward, I run for supervisor of elections in 1992. And I'm going up and down main corridors. I'd walk thousands and thousands and thousands of doors, door knocking, during the summer, sweating to death and everything. And I came to that house. And I knocked on it. I identified who I was. I'd love to do this. And by the way, you're on 39th Avenue. I'd love to have a yard sign. And so she said, I support you, and you can put out a yard sign. That's fine. I said, great. I said, by the way, before I leave, I got a quick question. How long have you lived here? And she goes, believe it or not, we moved in when it was brand new. And,
wow.
Yeah, in like 1972 or something. And I was like, that's pretty crazy. I'm going to tell you a story. And I proceeded to tell the story that I just told you, and tears just rolled down this woman's face. And she goes, my husband, who passed away, 5 years ago, whatever, told that story 1,000 times. He always wondered where you were.
Wow.
It was crazy. And we just shared this moment. It was very surreal. But she was like, thank you for bringing that up. She goes, you have no idea how many times that story came up and how many years went by. We wondered where this little boy ended up. And so really, really cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool, fun story. But, growing up, there were all kinds of stories like that
Sure.
that really kind of shaped me into who I am. But I always had money from this perspective. When I would wake up, I'd have a nickel in my pocket, and when I went to bed, I had 10 cents,
Mm.
and then 10 cents to 15, and 15 to whatever. And when '08 hit, it was kind of an interesting moment. You're talking about you had successes and failures.
Right.
I had to identify very quickly, and Tom Malini was one of my mentors. I have several, but Tom Malini was the president of M&S Bank, and he said, "Mitch, you're going to bed, and you're waking up the next day with less money in your pocket, and you got to figure out where the hemorrhage is." And that really taught me a lot of very principled kind of hard decisions to make in regards to like lifestyle changes and different things that you have to look at doing. And so, and we have to do that. And I do a much, much better job of that. And I mentor people now myself in terms of, how to keep track of the many moving pieces, especially as large an organization as I, had.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I've started 12 companies and still have several of them. And so it can get very complicated at the end of the day when you're just looking at a raw number, and what's going on with all the different silos.
How active or involved are you in your companies in terms of, because there's absentee ownership.
Yeah.
And some say that's just not an option. I mean, that's not going to work. That is a recipe for failure.
No, I think if you get the right leadership within your organization, it's fine.
Okay.
I mean, if you think about, I'll put it on a global scale. So, I have a lot of obligations to the banks. So in a really kind of a Mitch way, I think,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of work for the bank, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're trusting me. They don't manage my properties. They're absentee owners, right?
Yeah, okay. Sure.
Yeah. So it's exactly the same. So if you do the same kind of setup, if you will, say, hey, I need to know all about you and how you operate and who you're going to be, and are you going to fulfill this obligation to do the best, have the best interest of the company, then they can run themselves.
Fair enough.
So that's kind of a weird concept to think about, but it's very similar to that.
What would you do? What would you say to an entrepreneur, somebody who's got an idea?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's a product, maybe it's an existing idea or an existing product. Maybe they're starting a company just like somebody else has, maybe a service company.
Yep.
What's your advice to them on knowing what you know now in business? And they're brand new.
Yep.
What do they do?
So here's the thing that people don't really recognize. There's two factors. One is you have to stay in your lane. A lot of people think that just because they can, run a restaurant that they can, they think that just because they do one style of something that they can do another style of it. And that's not really true. I mean, I see this in a lot of cases where people, developers are good examples. Developers have certain things they do really well. My father was really good at residential. He wasn't good at commercial,
Mm-hmm.
where, conversely, I'm much more skilled on the commercial side than residential. I'm not a builder. I'm more of a developer, right? I can close deals. I know my lanes, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know what I'm really good at, and I know how to build organizations around that, all right? So when somebody comes to me, they have to understand, and we've done a horrible job in this country by conflating innovation with entrepreneurship. And I don't mean to beat up like the University of Florida, because they're a wonderful asset to our community. Like, I have nothing bad to say. I will just tell you that they're very, very different. An innovator is not an entrepreneur. The number one reasons businesses fail is the inventor thinks they can take the product to the marketplace. Henry Ford did not invent the automobile, as an example. He was an entrepreneur. You do not take an offensive lineman and tell them to then go play baseball. You don't take a baseball player and say go swim. You don't take a swimmer and say go play soccer. Right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so everybody has their lane. Those are all sports. So you can look at business, and then there are lanes that you're really good at, and there are lanes that you're not. And people don't take that in. They don't take that constructively internal to say, look, I know what I'm capable of. I know what I'm excel at and what I don't excel at. And so that's the first bare bones characteristic. I will tell you, in middle school, everybody was supposed to be an astronaut. The space program was blowing
Right.
up. It
I
was.
understand.
The teachers came in and went around the room and said, "Little Johnny and little Liz and little Melissa and little Mitch, you need to do your homework because you need to be an astronaut." And you know what happened to me? This is a true story. I've told this one a lot, especially recently. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I didn't necessarily take it as a bad thing. It's kind of interesting. Most kids would feel almost bullied over something like that. But I looked around the room. Now, I did decent in school. I'm not going to say I was, the dummy. But the fact of the matter is, I learned I wasn't going to be an astronaut. That teacher could tell me all I wanted, but I was not going to be an astronaut. And I remember going home. We had this corner mirrored bathroom. They had like mirrors here and then a door. I just remember like it was yesterday. And literally, I looked at myself and had a conversation. What are you going to do? And that's when I realized I'm going to be the smartest person in the room because I'm going to surround myself with smarter people. And I tell that at meetings all the time as a joke. I say, hey, just letting everybody know I'm the smartest guy here because intellectually, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I've brought all the right people together. So business owners need to recognize their lane, their capabilities, and what they're able to do. And you're not going to be able to have an inventor. Dr. Cade invented Gatorade, but he didn't put it on the shelf.
Right.
That's a great example. He's not an entrepreneur. He's an inventor. Brilliant idea and change the world, right? And so those are kind of the kinds of things. When you think about this, so I love telling the Dolly Parton story about the pie supper. Have you ever heard the pie supper?
I've not, and I love Dolly Parton.
Oh, so she tells a story about she was a young girl, and there were these boys that she was all of a sudden, boys attracted to girls, and girls, boys, whatever,
Right. Yeah.
And so they had this thing, and it happened a lot back in the day, and they had a pie supper. So the girl would cook a pie. So Dolly Parton cooked a pie, and she took it to the pie supper, and everybody cooked pie. All the girls cooked pies, and all the boys came there, and they would auction off the pie. And if you won the auction, you got to have a piece of pie with the girl.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And so the reason I bring this story into it is very relevant to business. So she goes there, she takes the pie. Well, she had several boys bid on it. Okay. So that was kind of an interesting dynamic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the one boy, Dewey King won the contest. So he sits down, they have pie. Well, guess what happens? Okay. So the teacher comes along. Okay. And the teacher says, hey, by the way, you don't talk with your mouth full. Okay. And you chew with your mouth closed. What's interesting about that whole entire story is everybody had a role in that, right?
Sure.
And so the teacher was really playing that was the leadership, right? That was the constructive moment. She was creating the pie, right? That's the invention. And then you have customers, you have supply and demand. There's so many little tidbits in all of that kind of align with how the world goes around. Right? He was a mentor to her, the teacher was, to say, do you know that she went home? You know what the takeaway of the whole thing was? What the teacher taught her. The teacher taught her how to be a polite young woman and how to do things the correct way. Because she was, from a pretty simple backwoods,
absolutely.
Place. And so I love the parallels in that story because people kind of get it. And so business owners are the same way. So there are opportunities to be in leadership. There's opportunities to be entrepreneurs. There's opportunities to be inventors. There's opportunities to understand supply and demand. And all those things, all those characteristics come to play. And you have to understand where you are.
And that's sometimes hard because you have to be honest with yourself.
You have to be very honest. Well, whoever you're having honest conversations with needs to be honest. It can't be a slap on the back and here's some money and go make it happen.
Yeah.
it's the number one reason they fail. They need an entrepreneur that understands how to get it. My brother Christopher went through that in Silicon Valley. He was part of startups for several startups before he finally said, you know what, I'm doing my own thing. I get it.
Yeah.
So he took his program that they had, this program they had designed. He understood how to do business outreach and get customers, and of course, did well.
So 20 years ago, I think it's about 18, 19 years ago. I was younger at the time, right? And I knew this developer in the area, and I was like, I got this idea. We could build a golf course on some property. And this developer, I called him. I said, hey, which pretty ballsy of me, to be honest with you, as a 20-year-old, calling this guy who's just made his living. But I didn't know any better, to be honest with you. He didn't maybe have the business sense at the time. And he just said, well, Ben, he was very kind. He said, Ben, it's not that simple. Golf courses aren't just profitable. In order to do it, you really need to build something around it, so your homes and stuff like that. And that's a whole nother game in terms of infrastructure and cost, even getting things approved. Here I'm going, yeah, build a golf course. There's some nice land.
Right.
So simple. But what he said has stuck with me all these years from a mentor level of, oh, it's not that simple. It's a lot more complicated. And of course, being seasoned and more experienced, now you learn these things. Can you tell me, and I'm putting you on the spot, a historic figure in time that you had the chance to have coffee with them today or lunch? Who would that be?
Well, it would certainly be Warren Buffett for me. He's a very principled person. He understands the dynamics of, a lot of, on one hand, time goes by fast. We get that because, but it also depends on your lifestyle and how you celebrate those victories and wins. And, if you're looking back or if you're looking forward, there are certain characteristics. I tend to look forward a lot more than I look back. I don't have this dialed in memory of saying, hey, tell me your, favorite 10 vacation spots. I'm like, holy crap, it's part of life and I love it. I certainly remember it, but I don't categorize it that way. I look forward a whole lot more. But Warren Buffett is a very principled person, and he has the patience of somebody like I've never seen. And so to understand that there's going to be cycles within business and opportunities that are going to come, and then opportunities that won't be there, and then opportunities that come, and then opportunities that won't be there. So if you look at his portfolio and how he's built that, Berkshire Hathaway especially, he's been able to take those opportune moments of time and kind of have those little moments of hockey stick, to his portfolio. And so that would be somebody that I would definitely do. I will tell you that the characteristic of even like San Francisco Tech City, which is the greatest example of late, the reason that it's so successful is because it's really not a community that, for instance, my father would have designed. He's like, what are you doing? Kind of thing. It's the value of listening. And easy said, hard to do. But you have to listen to the dynamics of your customer, and you have to understand the dynamics of the future as well. I was just asked in an interview, what one thing do you want to do? What's the next one thing you want to do? For me, it's to get a flying car. That's what I want to get. I want to get a flying car. It's the future. It's absolutely here. They're doing it every day. I've been talking about it for a long time. Well, not a long time, but been ahead of the curve a little bit about talking about it. But that kind of gives you that future look, right? And so the reason I bring that up is because Tech City was designed by listening to the needs of others, and it really is dialing into the Gen Z, X, and millennials. It's that simple. So a lot of the concepts I'd originally come up with for Tech City were for me, and then I would beta test it. I would literally get groups of people, predominantly young, University of Florida, and I'd buy pizza and beer. What better way to attract a group? And so I'd say, hey, what do you think about this? And I'd lay it out. And I had like 6 housing designs, right? I had from like a retreat style kind of, with swimming pools and volleyball court. It had all kinds of activity stuff, and it was, more of a high rise, and you got a suite, and then you come downstairs and it had 4 or 5 living rooms, and over there's bachelorette, and there's Monday Night Football, and you pick and choose, and, really coordinated, fun stuff that everybody could participate in. And I remember, there were people in the room, business owners, saying, I'm married, my wife is pregnant, I've got 2 dogs, I want to grill out the back door, and I'm not going to hand off my kid in some, common living room. Now, the suites had TVs and such too, but you get my point. And so we listened and we figured out what housing styles, what businesses would be attracted to the kind of size and scale buildings we were doing and that kind of thing. And so that's really what it was. And so it is a proof of concept that listening can be much more beneficial to the outcomes of what you're looking for, because it's designing for the future workforce, not for the workforce of yesterday. And that's a huge mistake by a lot of people.
So San Francisco Tech City, in a nutshell, is a development that you have taken environmental concerns into account when you think about the solar that the power that you're producing through solar.
Yep.
But you've got businesses in there, some that are growing,
right,
but a bunch that are startups, and almost like an incubator, right?
So we're taking on entrepreneurs, not innovators, for one. So they have their product, they have their, it might be a patent protected technology or whatever. So they bring it there. So they're not exactly startup in the sense of going through their beta tests and all of that. So not to wordsmith what you're saying, but it's very important to understand that the companies are coming out there certainly are growing. That's a fact, and we've had several. We've got Menandir Engineering's growing out there right now. We've got a new space that they're adding on to their existing as we're speaking, and of course we've got tons of construction going on, tons. And we broke ground yesterday on a new cafe. We haven't announced who it is yet, but so we're it's just going gangbusters. But those companies are coming out there. Some of them want to locate there. I've had, head of real estate for several companies literally come by and say, this is the wave of the future. We had Florida Trend up there the other day, and they understand that that's, I tell them, I said, it's 1.0. What we're trying to do is a proof of concept with a sustainable community. It's the only community in the world, 82 acres in size, producing all the energy on site for on-site consumption. And so we're actually overproducing solar. So we're feeding out into the grid the remaining portion of the solar that we're not able to use on campus, which is a first of its kind, anywhere we've been able to find anywhere in the world. And it's by design. It was very early design features and how to accomplish that. It's not that simple unless you give it a lot of purposeful thought and work with a team of people that understand how it all works. We have the world's largest bifacial solar array out there, and things like that capture more solar per square foot than the average solar panel, that's just facing the sun. Ours also face Earth and catch refractive energy. Wow. So we're doing solar trees out there. I've got another 24 solar trees going in. It's a new design that I've done. And then we have the ones up front now. You can't actually do those in Gainesville, Florida, which is crazy when you think about it, because they're really cool. We get people from around the world that come there and take pictures with them. It really has set the tone and stage for something creative and neat and unique that's going on there. We're attracting businesses from around the world. We just landed Vobel, which is a Hong Kong-based company, $5 billion market cap company. They're hiring 70 engineers out of the University of Florida. We have Neurotronics, a wholly owned company out of Japan that's working on, it's a medical device company. We, of course, have the brewery and the wine bar, and we've got preschool. Now we're going to have after-school programs up there in about a month, about 6 weeks or so. And it just goes on. Medical device companies and high-tech and biotech, and they're literally creating skin replacement technology for burn patients around the world at Tech City. You have Simply Faster, which does work with elite athletes all over the world. Virtually every gold medalist especially in track and field and some of the other highly performance areas, are working with Simply Faster and have their products. And they're developing new products and getting in literally, they have like 35 products, and it's unbelievable. And we have other announcements. I can't even really tell you the type of companies that are coming that are just unbelievable. That it's like, how in the world is this happening? We have 55 companies out there. We're landing a deal about every 3 weeks in Alachua, Florida.
Wow.
Yeah. Florida Trend just wrote us up as the fastest growing tech community in North Central Florida. It's remarkable. It's constant deal flow. It's not stopping. We literally are still having conversations with multiple tenants. The next 2 buildings are about to go up after we finish building I, which, like I said, it'll be about 6 or 8 weeks, something like that.
Who do you credit for the success?
A team, a lot of people that I have been very blessed to be around. We have made a few pivots away from some that were not contributing to the outcomes that we were looking for, but for the most part, the team's held very, very solid. PPM over at the solar side has really helped us dance through the hoops of really maximizing our abilities out there, and that's key to it. These companies, they're not checking off boxes. We don't even use the solar as like this political statement or we're not even claiming to be this environmentally, robust company. That's not our drive. We're trying to really inspire to do the right thing and not worry about the white noise that goes on around all of that. And so, and quite honestly, people know when you're passionate about something.
Mm-hmm.
And they know that my team and I feel like myself are truly and genuinely passionate about the things we're doing for the city of Alachua and why it is going to be a beacon of growth for tech communities, local and for around the world. We just got another confirmation of another deal out of the hub. Downtown Gainesville is going to come up here, and it's happening. And truthfully, and I say this humbly and not even in a way that I want anybody to feel embarrassed about it or anything, but I will tell you that as short as 4 years ago, because we're just turning 4 years, September 1st will be our 4-year anniversary of our ribbon cutting out there with now 55 companies. It's crazy, right? And probably more by then. But there was no one saying that this could be accomplished. There's no one saying, there were people that believed in us, including the city of Alachua and the leadership, but they were like, it wasn't happening up here at that time. If you remember, it really wasn't. And so, that was part of the Warren Buffett theory too. Be greedy when people are fearful and be fearful when people are greedy. And nobody was paying any attention the way they should have to Alachua, Florida, until Mitch Glaeser and myself showed up and said, hey, we're going to create the most unique community in the world called San Flasco Tech City.
It's quite unique. It's something, if you took a picture and showed it to me 20 years ago, I'd go, huh?
Yeah.
Futuristic in a way.
Right.
But it's outside the box.
But
it's
remember,
working.
I do, and I hope it happens really fast. I want to see 2.0. I want somebody to laugh at us and say, that's the way they used to do it. Now look at us now.
Yeah.
I would love nothing more than to have communities like this prop up all over the world that have a drive to do a very unique live, work, play composition. No, we're not getting a Publix. We also don't have parking meters, right? So we're a city, but we celebrate a lot of things cities don't have, right? And so you're not having to pull up to a meter and pump money into it just to go to a business.
Right.
To me, that's counterproductive, and that is not healthy and I think you're seeing this in communities around the world or throughout a country. The larger communities that have pressed the limits on extracting revenue out of patrons trying to go to a business it eventually is a house of cards that will fall.
Well, you go to hotels and big cities, and it's a $25 a night charge. I'm already paying for the room, and I got to pay to park.
Yeah.
2 questions for you. We're going to kind of take a little go a different direction.
Okay.
One, can you give me your biggest pet peeve? Or something that you're just absolutely like, when it comes to business, this is just the way you do it.
So
yeah.
I would think that, so it is funny. We are focused. I, by nature, the negative things that have happened to me in my life, I bury. My mother said there was a person who is going to go unnamed, but there's a person that came to me and said, "Hey, I want to do some creative stuff with you," and it was a charitable thing and so forth. And I was like, "Absolutely, let's do it, whatever." And I told my mother about it, and she goes, "Don't you remember what he did to you back when you were running against Rodney Long?" And da da da. I'm like, "Oh, I guess you're right." I'm like, I just totally just didn't even put it together. So I'm very forward focused. I will tell you, the only thing that drives me crazy is unethical behavior. Unethical, greedy, and really almost exclusively unnecessary behavior. It is something that drives me crazy. I hate to see it. And people get clouded in this gray area, and then all of a sudden they cross the line. And I think for some people, they get they cross it and they don't know how to unwind it. It's kind of like getting in the mafia.
Sure.
Once you're in, you can't get out, right? I mean, that's just not the way it works. And I say mafia meaning, as a concept. Now the mafia's gonna come after me, right? No, but unethical behavior and corruption that I find out about, it's very disturbing to me. So that's a big pet peeve.
Okay. Lighter note, how many pairs of boots do you have?
Well, I have one that I'm wearing now. If I was to count them, I have a lot of shoes too. Okay. So not just boots.
Not just boots.
No, I have a lot of shoes. I don't know. It's my one apparel product that I do like to spend money on. So I would probably say in the neighborhood of in excess of 20.
Okay. Leave it at that.
Something like that.
Leave it at that.
And what's funny is recently I have gotten rid of a few. And so I have a dear friend who is part of a church, and she I give all my hand-me-downs to her, and then she's able to find a way for them to get used.
Nice.
And so I gave a few pair. I set them out for her and tell her to come by the house. It's pretty funny. But I need to do more of that. I don't think 20 pair is probably needed.
maybe
but
it
was a tough decision this morning, I can tell you.
Sure. Everybody has their thing.
Yeah.
Whether it's collecting marble eggs, everybody's got, this is kind of my thing. What's one question I didn't ask you that you would have liked me to ask you?
Oh, well, that's different. The one question you didn't ask, but should have asked. Who my favorite sibling is? No. I don't want you to ask that. That's right. No. No, that's a great question. No, I guess to get in my head, it's really, and I know that's kind of what this is about, to try to find a commonality or something, the thread here that is common to understanding how I perform. I guess the question that. So I'll tell you an interesting one, and I don't know if it's a good question per se, but I was so I'm single, and had started seeing someone recently, and I'm still single. I guess
still
in a term of a category, but no, I mean, candidly, it's like, how in the hell are you still single? I mean, that's kind of comes up, right? Or whatever. I don't know, because I'm such a mean person, I guess. But I think, believe it or not, what will blow people's mind mostly about me is I am a extremely simple person. it's almost too simple. I do not tolerate white noise. You know, the clutter, the vitriolic chatter, and the political grossness, and everything that goes with it. And so it also dives into relationships. I'm not a drama guy. I just do not tolerate it. I don't believe in it. I don't think, here, let me put it in this context. And I learned this one from my brother, one of my brothers, Greg. If you have, and you see this so often, and it's really sad. And if you think about so humans are creatures of habit, right? We're highly, highly intelligent animals, okay? Super highly intelligent versus the rest of the animal kingdom where, it's not even measurable. So you get in a spat with somebody, say you're dating or spouse or whatever, and the first thing you do to kiss and make up is you send them flowers or you do something kind for them. So you're going to drive towards that behavior. So if I want to get flowers, then I need to have a spat because now I'm going to get flowers. You see what we're doing here to each other? Instead of sending flowers because we had such a beautiful moment together and I want to celebrate that. And, we had a difficult time. We're going to get through this together, but we're not going to celebrate it. So for me, it's the simplicity of that I think, that's the question of like why, the big why is because I think about things in a very different way. And so when I want positive outcomes, I look at what are the characteristics to drive towards that. And if it's not healthy, then I extract that from my life. And a lot of people don't get that. It's hard to live that way in a way. I mean, for a lot of people. Sure. And it's probably the characteristic, possibly, maybe not. I mean, maybe we can ask all my ex-girlfriends, but, it's certainly, at the heart of what kind of complicates things because I just want to live purely good. And maybe I'm doing it. Maybe the measurement needs to have some yin and yang to it. And I don't necessarily like that.
Sure.
But that's kind of a personal note. I know maybe your listeners don't want to hear that.
No, I probably do.
But,
So,
I mean, it's
absolutely
relevant. We do this in work. We do this in life. We do this with our companies. We do all of this stuff that is not driving the right outcomes. We're always playing catch up. It's like, when the company's not doing good, you're like, hey, let's do an incentive program. We'll incentivize everybody to bring the company up instead of saying, hey, we're doing great. We really would like to see if we can't press the limits and do better. What kind of creative ideas could we bring here? It's always on the downside that those things in the struggles, the people get serious. Listen, this is the number one reason companies are born in a recession, right? Because people are like, what do we need to do? We need to knock more doors. We need to, we need to promote. We need to be aggressive. We need to be in your face. We need to take them out to dinner. We need to do whatever. But boy, when things are going great, you're just like, let me just punch my clock and take a paycheck.
I've seen that in the real estate business.
Of course.
Things slow down. My phone's blowing up for meetings, coffee, lunches, more marketing than ever of everything. Yep. And when everything's fine, it's like nobody really pays attention to it, right? Which is maybe the time you should be.
You should, because you could own the market at that point.
Sure. You got a book recommendation for entrepreneurs or people out there that even if it's not business, spirituality, anything?
I'm not, unfortunately, one of my weaknesses is that I'm not a big reader. I and I need to do a better job of audiobooks and things like that. I know John Spence has some great books out, and he also has great recommendations. That's what I would lead you towards.
Yep.
One of my, a dear friend and also someone I highly, highly admire is John Spence. And so I would follow him. That would be my recommendation instead of me giving you a particular book.
Okay, yeah.
To look at his list of books, and he has them out there. I will tell you, I heard a great recommendation. I've not read it yet or heard it yet, but I understand that the new president of the University of Florida, Ben Sass, actually has a book out, and it is supposedly phenomenal. He also does a great job of narrating it, I heard.
Very nice.
So I would it was given to me on such a high level of recommendation that I have a feeling that I'm not steering anybody wrong to go listen to that. I think you'll dial into a lot more of who he is. A real funny story. So I own a historic hotel north of Kansas City in the state of Nebraska. And so,
which is where he was he a senator?
He was a senator, right? And so, ironically, it's in Falls City, Nebraska. It's a great hotel, boutique. It's beautiful, historic. It's 99 years old, and it's kind of a centerpiece of the community. And so, anyways, Ben Sass's team calls up and said, "Hey, the Sass for Senate team wants to come by, Falls City. Can we use your hotel?" And so he actually came by the hotel and had a fundraiser and a meet and greet kind of thing.
Sure.
And so it's funny. I tell people that story and like, holy, like him before we know him. And it's kind of comical how small a world it is.
Full circle, right?
Yeah, completely.
Mitch Glaeser, thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah, thank you.